Hello, I'm Bruce Gordon with the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. The gambling industry is alive and well in Minnesota, but the laws can be rather confusing. The goal of the Department of Public Safety's Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division is not only to enforce the laws of the state, but to educate and inform the public. Now, it's an exciting time for sports fans as the NCAA recently released its March Madness brackets. Every year, tens of thousands of people from across the country are filling out those brackets, hoping to win some money. Special Agent Terry Kelley with Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement is joining us today to answer some of the most common questions about brackets and other gambling questions as well. Terry, let's talk about March Madness. We know somebody who's going to be filling out one of those brackets. Is it legal to pay to enter a pool with some friends and hoping for a big payday?
You know, the way you described it is not. It would not be legal. And let me explain why. There was three things that you talked about. One was consideration. That's giving something of value to participate. In this case, it was cash. And two, the element of chance was there, which means the outcome is based on chance. You have no control over it. Basketball games you're not playing in. And three, there was prizes awarded. When you have consideration, chance, and prize, in Minnesota that's called a bet or a gamble, and it's illegal for us to do. There is an exception for a private social bet, but that was intended for penny ante card games, you and I playing poker at our house with our buddies, or spur-of-the-moment wagers between two friends.
We know there are all sorts of opportunities out there to fill out a bracket, online, office pools. What's legal and what isn't?
You know, there are a lot of things you'll see online that companies, sports networks, newspapers are offering their bracket challenge online. And what you'll notice that they do is they don't charge you to enter to play. If you take away the element of consideration, you know, it's free for you and I to play, then it becomes legal because then it's just a promotion or a marketing thing for them.
Is there a difference between an office pool of, let's say, 50 people and a pool where a friend invites a friend and they invite some more friends and pretty soon you have a pool of 1,000 people? Is that legal?
You know, as long as you have those three elements, again, if you're paying to participate and you're doing the bracket and there's prizes awarded, it doesn't matter how many people are involved. Again, you have those three things and it's still a gamble.
Oftentimes people are placing individual bets on games. It might be their alma mater or favorite team. Is it legal to place a bet between friends?
That goes back to that private social bet I talked about earlier. You and I can sit around and watch a football game and place a spur-of-the-moment wager between ourselves. Take that in contrast to the classic example we've all seen on TV of a bookie who's taking phone calls and ledgers and paying people out. That is illegal because all three of those things are present that I talked about, the consideration, chance, and prize. But like I said, you and I can make a little friendly wager between ourselves.
Terry, let's switch gears to fantasy games. There's an online booming business of fantasy sports like FanDuel and other companies that are out there that are enticing people to play those games online. What's legal and what isn't?
You know, fantasy football and other fantasy sports such as baseball, hockey, and basketball is legal. And there was a federal court ruling in 2006 that clarified that. And the biggest thing to remember about fantasy sports is that it's just that, it's fantasy. While the players you and I pick for our team are real players playing somewhere, that team that I'm assembling is not a real team playing the team that you're assembling. It's not an actual game that I'm betting on.
What about playing fantasy sports between friends? Fantasy baseball, football, is that different?
Nope, that would be the same thing.
What about any sports that might not be legal?
The only fantasy sports thing that we've come across in our experience is fantasy NASCAR. And the difference is that in fantasy NASCAR, you're taking a driver and their entire crew. You're not taking the person that's changing the tires from this team and the person who's washing the windows from that team and then the driver from that team. You're actually taking a real team that's working together somewhere. So that's still considered sports betting.
Terry, let's talk about contests that you see in bars and restaurants. Let's say a dart tournament. You have to pay an entry fee and they pay for prizes. Is that betting?
You know, it's not. You still have the element of paying for something and you still have the element of prizes, but you've now replaced the element of chance with an element of skill. A skill is something that can be improved with time and experience. Throwing a dart is a skill, so that would be legal.
What other types of questions and complaints do you receive at the Alcohol and Gambling Division?
You know, we have a lot of people who are trying to raise money for very good and reputable causes. They have a friend or a relative who has an illness or injury and they want to do something to help. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that they do end up becoming gambling and therefore illegal. One of the things we see quite often is something called a poker run. And they do it with motorcycles, they do it with snowmobiles in the winter, or even cars when there's no snow like right now. And what it is I go and I pay a fee. I go to a collection of places, usually bars, and at each place I go to, I either get a card or a series of cards, and when I get to the last location, whoever has the best poker hand or set of poker hands gets prizes. Now, if you go back to those three things I talked about, you've paid to enter, chance because you're playing with cards and there's prizes paid out, so that would be illegal.
A poker run is illegal.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Terry. And if anyone has a question or concern about gambling here in Minnesota, we're always willing and able to answer your questions at the Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division. If you go to our Department of Public Safety website, click on gambling, we have an excellent frequently asked questions page that talks about what we've discussed here today. Thank you for joining us and learning more about gambling in Minnesota.